One of the things I remember you and I talking about in the past, and you can see lots of them round here, is hedge lines.
Oh yes.
And about the first thing I did with you was you and I had a discussion, and I remember you saying hedge lines can be the oldest feature in the landscape.
Yeah.
What if you're an average person wandering around, how would you sort of imagine that you might begin looking at hedge lines in your village, your area?
Well, I suppose the first thing to look at is whether they're straight or curved or bent or whatever, because if they are the result of let's say enclosure from about 1600 onwards, something like that, the tendency is for them to be straight. You know, they're put in by surveyors, they're straight lines, they're drawn on a map first and they go out and plant them up. If on the other hand they're older than that, they might be all sorts of shapes. One of the characteristic shapes you get a lot is either in plan or when you look along them, they're sort of reversed S shape, where there's been strips of arable in the common fields around the village, and then they've been enclosed by people just hedging in their strip.
So first you look at the shape of them, and the other thing you and I discussed ages ago was the whole thing about species. And I know there's different ways of looking at it, but fundamentally recognising the number of species in a hedge can be useful, and what might that tell you in an ideal... I'm not talking about the hedge you've got at home, which you've deliberately planted up with about 48 species.
No, 23
species, just to prove that not all hedges, but anyway.
No, to prove my bungalow is built in an iron age enclosure.
That's right, yes.
No, there is information in the species. I mean, a lot of the enclosure hedges that are put in, for example, in the 18th or 19th century, are predominantly hawthorn.
Sorry, it's the bluebells.
It's the bluebells. Sometimes they're hawthorn, blackthorn. You know, there are a limited number of species, whereas, as a rule of thumb, the older the hedge...
Sorry.
You want some hay fever pills or
Probably,
something? Yes. The older the species, the older the hedge, the more variety of species there are. And it's actually not rocket science to learn 15 species that you're likely to get that are of interest. I mean, things like wayfaring tree, spindle, you know, once you can recognise those, you're likely to be in an old hedge.
And the sort of theory that is loosely thought about is if you take a certain length of hedge line,
30 metres or something like that,
you count the species, and it would be true to say, without being too scientific about it, that the more species there are in that hedge line, the older it's likely to be.
The likely is that it's an ancient hedge, I mean, if you look at known medieval hedges that you know for one reason or another must have been there in 1400 or something like that, the chances are that they're going to have more species and a variety of these things like wayfaring tree, spindle, and indeed a variety of ground flora, you know, the dog's mercury and stuff like that, than a hedge putting in 1800 or 1830, which is likely to have predominantly hawthorn in it.